Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Skeleton. Today, I'm sharing 10 scary stories from people who encounter Bigfoot in the Appalachian wilderness. But before we start, please make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and you can change your mind later. And if you've got any ideas for what the next video should be, feel free to drop them down in the comments. My Uncle Clint had this old trap line that ran deep through the woods north of a place called Deep Ridge. That winter, Clint busted his back falling through the floor of a collapsed barn he was salvaging. So naturally, my mom volunteered me. Didn't ask, didn't check. Just told him I'd come out and help for the rest of the season. I think she was mostly excited to get me out of the house. School was remote that year, and I'd been getting twitchy stuck inside. She said something like, "You're old enough to pull your weight," which, translated from mom speak, means go do hard things for someone else and don't complain about it. Clint didn't argue. He just showed up the next morning with an extra pair of boots and a thermos of black coffee I wasn't allowed to drink. I spent the next 3 weeks following him through knee-deep snow, dragging a frozen bait bucket and trying to keep up. He had an old Ruger rifle he always carried, and eventually he let me hold it when his back started acting up. It was way too heavy for me, but I pretended it wasn't. I wasn't allowed to shoot it. I think he just liked the idea of someone walking behind him looking armed. Most days, it was fine, cold and quiet. We'd hike out early, run a few miles of line, check traps, haul back whatever was caught, then head home before dark. The woods didn't feel spooky, not really. They just felt vast, like you could shout your name and never hear it come back. Then came the day he split the line between us. We were standing at a fork, and Clint pointed down the northern loop. He said, "You take this one, I'll circle back around the south, we'll meet at the truck." It wasn't a suggestion. He handed me the rifle, gave me this little nod, and said, "Don't take your sweet time, and don't talk to anything that talks back." I laughed. He didn't. There were 11 traps along that loop, spread across maybe 3 miles of trail. I'd helped check them before, but never alone. I figured I'd just keep my head down, move fast, and not screw anything up. About halfway through, I spotted something in the snow. Tracks. They weren't like anything Clint had ever pointed out to me. These were strange, big. The kind of big that makes your stomach tighten a little. Longer than my boot by a good half, and spaced way too far apart for someone walking normally. No heel prints, no boot tread, just 5 thick, rounded toes and a wide, flat pad. They weren't crossing the trail either. They were following it. I stood there for a minute, staring, told myself it could be a bear. Maybe rearing up to sniff the air, moving on 2 feet for a bit, but the stride was off. Too long, too human, and heavier. The prints punched clean through the snow crust in places where Clint and I had barely left a mark the day before. I kept going, slowly, trying to be quiet without really knowing why. When I got to trap 8, I stopped pretending it was a bear. There was a birch tree beside the trap, thin, maybe 20 feet tall. The bark had been peeled away in these long, curling spirals, like someone had grabbed it and twisted. Not claw marks, no scratch patterns. Just smooth, bare wood stripped high up, way over my head. It looked almost surgical. I radioed Clint. Nothing but static. Tried again. Still nothing. I held the radio up, turned in a circle, even climbed a little ridge to get better signal. Third try, still static. That's when I started feeling exposed. I hadn't seen a squirrel all morning. No bird song, no rustling. Just the creak of old trees and the sound of snow cracking under my boots. Trap 10 had a squirrel in it, frozen solid, but there was no blood. The snare wire was just gone. Clean, like someone had untwisted it with their fingers. No marks on the ground except more of those weird tracks, circling the tree like something had stood there, watching. I stood still for a long time, holding the rifle like it could help even though I'd never fired it. My gloves were damp from sweat inside, even though the air was biting cold. Something about that spot made the hair on my arms lift under all my layers. I didn't go to trap 11. I just turned around and started walking back toward the truck. I knew Clint would call me soft or lazy or both, but I didn't care. Every step I took felt like something was matching me in silence just out of view. And then I heard it. Click, soft, sharp, like a tongue against teeth. I stopped dead, turned toward the ridge. Nothing. Then again, click, closer. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded deliberate, like it was mimicking something or someone. I dropped into a crouch behind a downed log, heart pounding. My breath came out in these slow, pale clouds that hung in the air longer than they should have. The sun was getting low, which meant the temperature was dropping fast. My legs started shaking, not from fear at first, but just from being still too long. Then I saw it. Movement through the trees, about 30 yards downhill. Just a flicker at first, then more. Something big weaving between trunks. Not fast, not loud, just smooth, controlled. I couldn't see its face, just a tall, wide shape moving with this strange side-to-side sway. Its back was this mottled gray-brown color that blended too well with the trees. Its shoulders rolled as it moved. It didn't walk like anything I'd ever seen. I didn't move until I couldn't hear it anymore. Made it back to the truck without looking back once. Climbed in, locked the doors, and sat with the rifle across my lap, eyes fixed on the tree line like it owed me answers. Clint showed up about 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, then at the gun in my hands. "You saw it," he said. Not a question. I nodded. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and said, "Next time, don't follow its tracks. It's not meant to be found." We didn't speak the whole drive home. My cousin Lee and I were spending winter break at our grandfather's cabin, although, to be honest, he never once called it a cabin. It was tucked deep in the hills of Darrow County, way off the main road, and a solid 30-minute drive past the last gas station with actual pavement. The place had electricity and a wood stove, plus a propane heater for backup, running water but no internet. Lee and I had been coming up there since we were little, usually during deer season or early summer. We knew where everything was, how to split kindling the way Granddad liked, which chairs creaked, and which steps would wake him if we were sneaking in late. That particular winter, it snowed early and hard. When we arrived that Thursday, the drifts were already nearly waist-high in places. Granddad had shoveled a narrow path from the truck to the front steps, but everything else was untouched. Just this thick, white silence pressing in from all sides. If you've ever been in the woods after a fresh snowfall, you know the quiet I'm talking about. It's not just the lack of sound, it's like the air itself is holding still. We settled in quick. Granddad made stew that night, the kind that tasted like it had been simmering since the morning before. He was up early the next day, chopping kindling and checking his traps while Lee and I slept in. By Saturday, he said he needed to drive into town to pick up more kerosene. He took the truck around noon and told us he'd be back before dark. Lee and I stayed back mostly because we didn't feel like bouncing around in a truck on half-plowed roads for 2 hours. We passed the afternoon playing cards and occasionally throwing more wood on the fire. The heater gave off that faint metallic click every few minutes, and you could hear it echo faintly through the cabin like someone tapping a coin on a table. Around 4, I looked up and noticed the smoke outside wasn't rising right. Normally, it would drift straight up or maybe waver a little with the wind, but now it was pressing flat along the roof and sort of sliding sideways like fog rolling off a ledge. Thing was, the wind had completely died down earlier that day. I stepped outside thinking maybe the flue was clogged or the draft wasn't pulling right. That's when I saw them. The tracks. They started maybe 15 feet from the back edge of the cabin, out near the first line of trees, and they were massive. I mean, each one was easily longer than my arm, maybe a little wider than my boot, and they sank down hard into the snow. Whatever made them had some serious weight behind it. They weren't animal prints, not even close. No claws, no pads, no deer hooves. Just long, deep impressions spaced far apart, almost too far for anything walking on 2 legs. But that's exactly what it looked like, upright, bipedal, like footsteps, but wrong. I didn't even call Lee. I just stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, she came out behind me, zipped up her coat, and asked what I was doing. I pointed, and she followed my arm without saying anything. We traced the trail together around the side of the cabin. The prints curved slightly, hugging the wall, and then continued along the back. They ended right where the tree line thickened again. But here's what got me. They didn't come back. No return path. No looping around. Just a clean trail in, then nothing. Like whatever made them had walked to the back of the cabin and stayed. Lee tried to brush it off. Said maybe it was a prank, or Granddad was messing with us, but I could tell she didn't believe it either. There were no other tracks. No signs of anyone tromping through the woods with snowshoes or dragging boards to fake those shapes. And like I said, Granddad couldn't go 20 feet without his cane, let alone hike through knee-deep snow making prints like that. We went back inside and made sure every window was latched. Even checked the little one in the pantry that we usually ignored. The front door was already locked, but we bolted it again anyway. By the time it got dark, the fire was the only warm light left. The propane lantern hummed softly on the table, casting long, jumpy shadows every time we moved. Neither of us said much. It wasn't like we were scared exactly, at least not yet, but something felt off. The air in the cabin felt heavier, like the walls were pushing in slightly. Then the smell rolled in. At first, I thought maybe the heater had kicked out something weird, but it wasn't that. It was musky, sour-like wet fur and mold and something meat-like underneath. It clung to the back of your throat, almost sticky. Lee thought maybe something crawled into the chimney and died, so she got down to check the flue while I kept an eye on the back window. And that's when I saw it. Or more accurately, didn't see it. The snow behind the cabin had this faint silver glow from the moonlight, just enough to make out shapes and shadows. But then, a piece of it just vanished. This tall, black gap. No edges, no reflection. Just a column of darkness standing between two trees, dead still. I whispered her name just once. She stood up and came to the window without a word. It didn't move. It didn't lean, or tilt, or sway like a person might. It just stood there, this impossibly tall thing blotting out the snow. We backed up into the kitchen without breaking eye contact. I reached for Granddad's hunting rifle, the one he kept above the stove. It only held 2 shells, but it felt better than nothing. Lee picked up the fire poker and held it like a spear. We waited. Didn't talk. Didn't breathe too loud. Then we heard the knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds, not on the door, on the wall. The actual side of the cabin. It was close, right outside. We didn't move. Then came the sound of steps. Slow, deliberate crunches in the snow, circling toward the front. Every few seconds, a pause. Then another step. Whatever it wasn't in a hurry. It knew we were listening. When it stepped onto the porch, the boards let out a long groan under the weight. Just once, then silence. No footsteps retreating. No sound of anything walking away. Just dead quiet. The smell was still there though. Thick, like it had soaked into the walls. We didn't sleep, not a minute. We stayed upright in the kitchen, holding our weapons like scared kids waiting for the boogeyman to leave. At some point, the propane lantern flickered out and we didn't bother relighting it. We just sat in the faint orange glow of the coals until dawn. When daylight finally came, we opened the door together, me with the rifle raised. The porch was empty, not a single mark. The wood looked undisturbed, like nothing heavier than a squirrel had touched it. But when we circled around to the back, the tracks were still there. Exactly the same, not softened, not melted, not changed in the slightest. When Granddad got back later that afternoon, we told him everything, but he just looked at us, real quiet, then walked over to the fire and sat down. After a while, he said, "I told you don't go near the woods at night." We stayed one more night. Didn't sleep then either. And in the morning, Lee and I packed up early and told Granddad we'd head home a day ahead of schedule. That was 15 years ago. I haven't been back. Lee hasn't either. I was 36 when I agreed to run my cousin Nolan's trapline for a few days. He had to take his little girl to the hospital down in Barrack, 3 counties south, and his wife had just thrown out her back, so they were in a bind. Nolan and I go way back. He covered for me during the messiest stretch of my divorce. His cabin's not the kind you find on a vacation site. It's a square box with a lean-to shed, sitting about 6 miles up a ridgeline outside Elbridge. I drove in as far as I could, then hiked the rest, carried my pack, a couple extra thermoses, and Nolan's bolt-action rifle. He told me I might get a bobcat in one of the cages. Figured better to have it, not need it. I started early the next morning. The traps ran in a rough loop north ridge first, then the side trail, and finally a long bend that wrapped behind the cabin. That way, you always ended up close to shelter, even if things got rough. I got through the north line by mid-morning and had a couple squirrels and one decent-sized red fox. I didn't bother dressing them out, just bagged them and marked the line for later. Thought I might come back the next day and reset everything once the weather cleared. By the time I reached the trail that looped back behind the cabin, the clouds had sunk low and heavy, just dragging across the treetops. Everything went quiet. That thick kind of quiet you only get in the woods during winter, when even the air feels like it's waiting for something. My boots were soaked, my gloves were freezing from the inside out, and I remember thinking I should have layered better. That's also right around when things started to go sideways. The 4th snare in that back line wasn't just tripped, it was destroyed. The cable was snapped in half, not rusted or broken at the clamp. Twisted until the strands popped apart like someone had grabbed both ends and kept twisting long past the breaking point. I crouched to get a better look and found claw marks, or at least what I thought were claw marks, on the tree. Deep, deliberate grooves, about shoulder height. I ran my gloved fingers over them, 4, maybe 5 inches long each. Fresh. The bark was still wet underneath. My first thought was, maybe a bear woke up too early. You hear about that sometimes. One gets confused by the weather, climbs out hungry and angry. But this was January. No food, no sign of a den nearby. Still, I filed it under possible and made a note to tell Nolan we might want to shift the line lower come spring. Then I got to the 5th snare. There wasn't anything left of it. The orange flagging tape still fluttered from the sapling it had been tied to, but the cable, the anchor, even the notch I'd cut into the trunk to seat the stake all, gone. I circled the area, thinking maybe a critter dragged the whole setup off. It happens. Sometimes they get wrapped in the wire and panic, pull it into the brush. But the ground was clean. No blood, no fur, no drag marks. What I did find, though, was a trail leading off toward the old overgrown logging road. That's where I saw the prints. I don't know how to describe them exactly, but they weren't animal, and they weren't human either. They were long, wide depressions, oval-shaped and spaced far apart. 3, maybe 4 feet between each one. Too far for walking, too regular for stumbling. They ran in 2 neat lines, side by side, like someone running with giant snowshoes. Only there were no frames, no tread patterns. No heel, no toe. Just smooth, deep compressions like someone pressing down with a flat, heavy plate. I followed them for about 50 yards. The trail curved behind a small ridge, and that's where the footprints just stopped. They didn't fade out or double back. They just vanished, like whoever or whatever made them had lifted straight off the ground. That's the point where my stomach dropped, not just from the cold either. I stood there for a long minute, trying to make sense of it. Told myself it could have been snowdrift or some weird melt pattern. But my hands had started shaking, and I could feel this tight, twitchy ache crawling up my spine. I turned back and headed for the cabin. The trail down was slick and narrow. I kept one hand on the rifle and the other free in case I needed to catch myself. About halfway there, I caught a smell, sudden and sharp, like something had died and fermented in the same spot. Part wet dog, part old fruit. It hit me fast, made me gag into my scarf. I thought maybe a raccoon had found the fox I left out by the shed, but the smell was wrong. Too fresh, too targeted. Then I saw the trees ahead of me. One had a long strip of bark peeled off in a clean, vertical line, like it had been sliced with a razor. And the next tree over had something that made my knees go weak, a handprint, pressed right into the snow-crusted bark. Open palm, 5 fingers, no glove, no fur, just a raw, bare imprint. The snow melted slightly around the edges like the hand had been warm when it touched. I didn't go any further up the ridge. I cut down the slope toward the creek bed, half sliding as I went. Nearly twisted my ankle at one point, but I didn't care. I just wanted the cabin in sight. When I finally saw the roof line through the trees, I ran the last 50 feet, didn't stop to listen, didn't turn around. I slammed the cabin door shut behind me and threw the latch. It was old, brass, and about as secure as a screen door, so I dragged the kitchen table over and wedged it against the frame. My gloves were soaked through and my hands were useless, so I lit a match with my teeth to start the fire. I sat down on the rug and just waited. For nearly an hour, I didn't hear a thing. No wind, no birds, nothing but the soft ticking of melting ice dripping from the gutters. Then something hit the porch, just once. A single heavy step, not a knock, not someone stumbling, just weight. Enough to make the old boards creak loud enough for me to hear it through the wall. And then, silence. I sat there holding Nolan's rifle across my knees, staring at the door until the fire burned low. I didn't move. I didn't even blink much. Every so often I thought I heard something outside, a shuffle, a scrape, but it never repeated, just enough to make my skin crawl. At some point past midnight, I must have nodded off. When I woke up, the light coming through the cracks in the doorframe wasn't sunlight. It was blue, not bright, not warm, pale and cold like the glow from a dying headlamp, filtering through fog. It gave the whole room this washed-out, underwater look. I crawled to the window and peeked through the corner of the curtain. There were prints all around the cabin. Same shape, same weird, oversized oval marks, only now they circled the place. Pacing. Some overlapped. Some looked like they paused, then stepped aside. There were too many to count. And it wasn't just one set anymore. I saw at least 3 distinct trails, some deeper than others, like they'd taken turns watching. Then I saw the woodpile. It had been moved. Not knocked over, moved. Stacked neatly into a sort of open pyramid, maybe 3 feet tall, like someone had tried building a shelter or a frame. And right on top, perched like some kind of offering, was the fox carcass I'd bagged that morning. Still sealed in the bag, still frozen, but sitting dead center, untouched. I backed away from the window, closed the shutters, didn't look out again. I stayed up the rest of the night, rifle in hand, wedged between the mattress and the wood stove like a kid hiding from thunder. When the light finally faded and the snow started falling again, I still didn't move. Nolan came back 2 days later. Said the hospital visit ran long. I told him the snowstorm trapped me in. Said I couldn't finish checking the line. Left it at that. I left that same afternoon and paid a guy from town $50 to bring back my gear the next week. I haven't been in those woods since. My friend Jonah had just crawled out of the wreckage of a pretty brutal divorce, and I was coming off a long, miserable stretch of burnout at work. We picked a stretch of wilderness out in Monongahela National Forest, somewhere near Elwood Ridge, west of a tiny town called Hartwell. We parked on an old service road, barely more than a gap in the trees. There was a faded trailhead marker nailed into a pine that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air had that dry, brittle cold that settles into your lungs, but it wasn't unbearable. Honestly, the stillness felt kind of nice after the chaos we'd both been living in. Finding the trail wasn't exactly smooth. The markings were barely visible, and more than once we had to double back to stay on course. Not that it mattered. We weren't in a rush. The deeper we went, the better it felt. That first afternoon was calm, quiet, uneventful in the best possible way. We made camp just above a frozen creek. The ice was thick and silent, like it had been undisturbed for months. We set up the tents close together and got a decent fire going. Jonah pulled a half-full bottle of bourbon from his pack with a grin like he was saving it for just the right moment. We passed it back and forth until the burn in our chests started to beat out the cold in our bones. Around midnight, we both heard something crunch in the woods behind us. Just once. One solid step in the snow. I figured it was a deer, maybe something sniffing around the creek. Jonah squinted into the dark and muttered something about black bears. Either way, we didn't go looking for it. It was cold, the fire was warm, and we were too tired to play wilderness detective. Besides, animals stay clear of fire. Usually. The second day, we moved deeper into the ridge, hiked a couple of miles until we found a clearing that opened up to this wide, shallow valley. It looked untouched. Not even old prints or game trails. Just smooth snow, broken only by the occasional half-buried log or dry brush poking through. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears feel like they're ringing. We set up camp again in a flat patch between two big hemlocks. Built the fire early, since it was already dropping below 20 degrees by late afternoon. Everything around us felt still. Too still, maybe, but neither of us said it out loud. Right after sunset, we heard the noise again. Branches snapping. Not quick or sharp, slow, deliberate. South of us, down in the valley. A few steps, then silence. Then another, a little closer. I clicked my radio and asked Jonah if he heard it too. He didn't say anything, just clicked back once. We both stood there for a minute, scanning the trees. Then it stopped. About an hour later, Jonah unzipped my tent and ducked in without saying a word. He looked off, not scared exactly, but definitely shaken. He said he saw something, not an animal, not a person either. Said it was tall, too tall to be anything natural, and that it had moved through the trees without any sound except for the snow under its feet. Said it didn't walk like it was trying to sneak, just walked like it belonged there. I told him he was probably just spooked, maybe caught a trick of the light, or saw his own shadow. He didn't argue, but he didn't laugh either. He hadn't had anything to drink that night. We sat out by the fire for a while after that, just listening. Every crackle from the fire made us flinch a little. Every gust of wind had us scanning the tree line. I wasn't sure what we were even looking for. A little after midnight, we heard the scream. I don't really know how to describe it. It was an animal, but it wasn't human either. It started low and guttural, almost like it was being dragged up from the ground, and then rose into this high, twisted pitch that didn't feel right in your ears. Like something was stretching the sound too far. We just froze. No discussion, no planning. Just stood there, staring at the dark. And then came the footsteps. They were slow, heavy. Each one landed with a wet thud, like something massive was sinking just a little into the snow with every step. They weren't running. They weren't stumbling. They were steady, confident. Like whatever it was, knew exactly where it was going. We killed the fire immediately and climbed into Jonah's tent together. It was barely big enough for both of us, but we didn't care. We didn't talk. We just lay there, fully dressed, radios off, holding our breath every time we heard something crunch outside. We heard it circle us, once, maybe twice, then nothing. When morning came, we stepped outside, half expecting to see nothing at all, but the tracks were there. Big, over a foot long, 5 toes, wide arch, no claws, no dragging, just deep, perfect impressions pressed clean into the snow. One after another, right past the tents. Not around, not stopping. We packed in near silence. No breakfast, no small talk. Just threw everything into our bags and started moving. We figured we could make it back by nightfall if we stayed focused, but somewhere along the way, we missed a turn. The snow had started falling again, dry, sharp flakes that felt like sand on your face. After an hour, the trail was gone. Our own prints were vanishing behind us. Every tree started to look like the last. Nothing felt familiar. So we did what made sense, kept heading downhill, hoping we'd hit the service road eventually. That's when Jonah's radio crackled again. It wasn't a voice. Not exactly, just this low, rhythmic breathing. It came through like static, but steady, like it was close. It didn't sound human. Didn't sound like anything I've ever heard. I stopped. So did Jonah. We didn't speak. Then, out of the trees to our right, came the scream again. Closer this time. Way too close. We ran. No idea how far. The trees blurred into white and brown. The snow whipped up around us and turned everything into a gray smear. At some point, we stumbled into a hollow and saw it. An old lean-to shelter, half buried and rotting, probably built decades ago by someone who thought they'd come back to fix it. We crawled in and pushed snow into the opening, anything to seal it off. It wasn't much. Just walls, a partial roof, some broken beams. But it felt like the only safe place left in the world. We sat there in silence, backs to the wall, waiting. The footsteps came again. One slow lap around the shelter. Then it was quiet. We didn't sleep. We barely moved. The cold started to feel less sharp and more like background noise. Our hands stayed clenched around the radios, even though we never turned them back on. When the sun came up, we followed the creek north. 5 miles later, we hit the road. A plow truck was coming up from Hartwell. We stepped into its path, and the guy barely even blinked. Just let us in without asking anything. Jonah moved to Florida a few weeks later. He doesn't talk about that trip. I don't think he ever will. I was 19 when I agreed to look after my cousin Leah's cabin over winter break. The place is tucked into the lower Blue Ridge foothills. At the time, it sounded like a good deal. I just finished a rough semester at Pellissippi. I was tired of sharing a room at my parents' house, and honestly, I kind of liked the idea of being out there alone. I brought a duffel bag of warm clothes, a box of paperbacks, and way too much trail mix. I figured I'd catch up on reading and sleep. That first morning, I found a handprint on the back window. Well, sort of a handprint. The shape was off. It had the right number of digits, but they were too long, and the palm was wide, like something had pressed down too hard. It was smeared, distorted, like someone or something had leaned against the glass with wet skin or fur. There weren't any prints in the snow beneath it. No trail, no sign of movement. I stood there staring at it longer than I probably needed to, then wiped it off with my sleeve. I didn't mention it to Leah. I figured it was just a weird smudge, maybe a raccoon or something oversized with dirty paws. The first few days were quiet, honestly peaceful. I split firewood, read by the stove, made hot tea every couple hours just to keep my hands warm. The cabin had a slightly crooked charm old floorboards that creaked at random, cabinets that stuck shut until you yanked just right, windows that always seemed to fog up from the inside. But I didn't mind. I was alone, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere or answer anyone. Then things got strange. One night, I woke up around 3 in the morning to this heavy, shifting sound on the porch. Not footsteps, more like something large swaying its weight back and forth. I lay completely still on the couch, heart thumping, just listening. It went on for maybe a minute, then nothing. The next morning, I opened the front door and saw 2 logs from the woodpile lean diagonally across it, like a makeshift barrier. I hadn't put them there. They weren't just lying on the mat. They were carefully positioned, like someone wanted to wedge the door shut from the outside but gave up halfway. I stared at them for a good 30 seconds. Then I stepped outside, looked around, saw no tracks, no marks in the snow. Just those 2 logs, damp with frost. I moved them aside and tried to shrug it off. The only other people nearby were Jack and Cora, an older couple who lived down the slope, maybe a quarter mile through the trees. I hadn't met them yet. Leah said they mostly kept to themselves and had lived there forever. I figured if it was them playing a weird joke, I'd probably just laugh it off later. Still, I kept the porch light on that night. The next evening, I went out to get more wood before dark, and something felt off. The woods were dead quiet. No wind, no rustling, not even a bird call. I hadn't realized how much background noise I'd gotten used to until it stopped. After I brought in a few logs and latched the door, I heard it, a knock. 2 soft taps on the front glass, almost polite. I stood up, looked out, nothing there. A few seconds later, I heard the same knock again. This time from the kitchen side. I flipped the porch light on and stepped closer to the window, but there was no movement. No prints in the fresh snow either, not even an animal trail. That night, I dragged the kitchen table in front of the door. I didn't feel scared exactly, just unsettled. Just unsettled, like something was testing boundaries. The snow started falling heavier after that. I stopped leaving the cabin unless I had to grab wood. I'd get bundled up, rush out, fill the basket, and come right back in. But even then I started noticing things. Scratches in the snow that didn't look like tracks, just deep, irregular lines. The kind that happen when something drags, not walks. At night, I began hearing movement on the roof. It was slow, deliberate. Not the scurry of squirrels or the thump of falling ice, more like someone pacing carefully, testing the weight of each step. I tried to reason it away, maybe snow shifting, maybe a heavy branch settling. But then it would stop, abruptly, like whatever was up there realized I was listening. 5 days in, I saw it. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth, same as always. There's a small window over the sink that looks out at the trees behind the cabin. I wasn't even paying attention at first, just zoned out, thinking about breakfast or whatever, and then I saw movement. Something ducked behind the shed. It was tall, not human, dark brown or black, but not shiny like fur. Just solid. I only caught a glimpse half a second, but it was enough to make me drop the toothbrush in the sink. I didn't leave the bathroom for a long time. I just sat there on the closed toilet, staring at the door. The next morning, I found muddy handprints on the side of the shed. They weren't fresh. They dried and cracked slightly, but they were long. I held my forearm up next to one of them. The fingers stretched almost the entire length. Too narrow for gloves, too long for people. That was the same day the internet died. The satellite dish stopped connecting. No warning, no slow decline, just gone. I restarted everything, unplugged and replugged it. Nothing. My phone had one stubborn bar if I stood near the stove. I sent Leah a quick message, just saying everything was fine but asking if the service had gone out. It never showed delivered. I waited hours, nothing. That night was the loudest yet. It started with circling, heavy steps, moving slowly around the cabin. Then 3 sharp bangs on the wall behind the kitchen, spaced out, like someone wanted to make sure I heard them. Then silence. I stayed up all night. I didn't even try to pretend to sleep, just sat under a blanket, fire barely flickering, waiting for something else to happen. The next morning, I made up my mind to walk down to Jack and Cora's. I didn't care if I looked paranoid. I hadn't seen another human face in nearly a week, and I needed to hear someone else's voice, to know I wasn't imagining all of this. But the snow was deep, and only a few steps into the trail, I found something worse. New tracks. Not mine. Not boot prints. These were wide, sunken deep, and spaced too far apart to be anything natural. No clear toe shape, just long impressions like massive hands had pressed into the snow. And they weren't leading away from the house. They were coming toward it. I turned back. I didn't even hesitate. That night, I pushed every piece of furniture I could move against the doors. Every chair, every nightstand, even the coffee table. I sat in the dark, didn't eat, didn't speak out loud, just listened. Around midnight, the front door handle turned. Once. Slow, slow, then again faster, harder. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. After a few seconds, it stopped. I sat there until the sun came up, every joint locked in place. But the worst was still coming. On the 12th night, I was sleeping, or trying to, in the main room near the stove. Around 2, the hallway smoke alarm started beeping. Not full-on blaring, just a weak little chirp every few seconds, like the battery was dying. I opened the hallway door, and cold air hit me hard. My breath came out in a cloud. All the doors down the hall were open, every single one. I know I'd closed them before bed. I always did. I reached up to pull the battery out of the alarm and caught something in the reflection above me. In the glass dome of the light fixture, a tall figure, standing in the doorway, still. I spun around, but nothing was there. The next morning, I packed everything I could carry. I didn't even look back. Hiked straight down to Jack and Cora's, borrowed their truck, and drove into town without saying a word. My cousin Silas had this old hunting cabin way out in Marlow Ridge. That's where I went after things blew up back home. I needed quiet, space to think. And maybe, if I'm being honest, I needed to not be reachable for a bit. Silas had offered me the place for as long as I needed. He'd already taken off for a job site in Hallitown and left the key wedged under the stone step. The cabin itself wasn't much to look at. One room, small stove, cot in a corner, and a pantry stocked with canned stew and instant coffee. But it was dry, warm, and didn't ask anything of me. That was enough. By the time I got there, early December had already dumped 2 feet of snow. The trees were weighed down and the hill roads behind me had gone from slippery to impassable overnight. I spent the first few days settling into a routine, splitting wood in the morning, boiling snow on the stove, reading paperbacks I found in a bin under the cot. I felt weirdly okay, tired in the right way, like my brain had been unplugged. Then came the 4th night. It was getting dark fast, and I was down to the last armload of firewood for the night. The sun drops fast up there. One minute the snow's glowing orange, and the next it's just blue and gray and heavy silence. I threw on my coat, grabbed the flashlight, and crossed the clearing to the woodpile. I'd been stacking everything in neat little rows under the old lean-to Silas built years ago, but one of the smaller piles, just kindling and chopped branches, was scattered, like someone had kicked through it. My first thought was deer. Sometimes they nose around for whatever smells off, but there were prints around it that didn't make sense. I crouched down. The snow was soft enough to hold detail. What I saw wasn't hooves. It wasn't boots either. It looked like a foot, a massive one. 5 clear depressions, long like toes but too wide, too flat, easily twice the size of mine. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a bear, maybe slipping in the snow and leaving weird impressions, but the weight distribution was too even. No slide, no drag. Just perfect, solid steps. I told myself it had to be something explainable. It had to be. Still, that night I couldn't relax. Every little sound outside made me pause. The fire popping in the stove, the groan of the cabin walls settling. I lay there staring at the ceiling beams, running through explanations. Then, sometime around 2 a.m., I heard it, not loud. Just a slow, rhythmic crunching in the snow behind the cabin. I froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't branches. It was movement. Something taking steps. Careful ones. Then it stopped. Right behind the wall where my cot was. I sat up. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. And then 3 knocks. Low on the wall. Not angry or fast. Just steady. Deliberate. Like it was testing something. Or announcing itself. I stayed completely still. The kind of still where your body goes tense and your ears ring. After a minute, nothing else came. No more steps. No sounds of retreat. Eventually, the stove's heat started to fade, and my fingers went numb. I stayed sitting until the gray morning light finally leaked through the slats. When I stepped outside, the air was sharp enough to bite. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked around the back, hatchet in hand. I told myself it would be nothing. It was always nothing, right? But the prints were there. Wider apart this time. Same shape. Same strange proportions. They led from the tree line to the base of the cabin, paused exactly where I'd heard the knocks, and then turned around. Except they didn't turn. They just ended. 10 steps out from the wall, and then nothing. Like the snow itself had swallowed them whole. I spent most of that day inside. Chopped wood close to the door. Drank coffee that tasted like pine needles. Every time the wind brushed the windows, I jumped a little. That night, I didn't even bother trying to sleep. The following evening, I decided to make a slow circle around the cabin before sunset. Silas had left an old lantern out back, and I figured if I could just prove to myself it was all in my head, I'd sleep better. Classic mistake. I made it halfway around before I saw it. Up on the ridge. At first I thought it was just a tree, something charred by lightning maybe, all black and cracked. But then it moved, barely. Just enough to shift its balance. It wasn't a tree. It was standing there, upright, still, watching me. I couldn't see details, just the outline against the snow. But it was tall, thick through the shoulders, unnaturally straight. I backed toward the cabin slowly, never taking my eyes off it. It didn't move. I slipped inside and locked the door, like that would help. The thing is, I didn't see it again the next day, but the prints came back. Every morning after that, new ones. Sometimes looping around the outhouse, sometimes stopping just shy of the porch. They were always gone by midday, like it knew when I'd be looking. The sixth night, I broke my own rule. I looked out the window before bed. Just a quick peek, I told myself, just to check the clearing. I lifted the curtain and felt my stomach turn. It was closer this time. Not at the ridge, not at the trees, just past the woodpile, 7 or 8 feet tall at least. Shoulders too broad for a human, but shaped like one, mostly. The arms were long, way too long, way too long. It just stood there, motionless. Its face was in shadow, but I saw the eyes. They weren't glowing, they weren't animal eyes. They were deep, set back, staring directly at the cabin, directly at me. I dropped the curtain, sat on the floor, heart pounding, hands shaking. I stayed there until the sky started to lighten. The prints were gone again by morning. That was it. I couldn't stay another night. I packed everything I could carry and left that afternoon. Hiked 6 miles through heavy snow and frozen brush until I hit the Ranger Road. My sister asked if I could watch her son, Colin, for the afternoon while she ran errands. I said sure. It gave me something to do, and honestly, I was grateful for the distraction. Her house was quiet, and watching Colin was easy. He was too sweet-tempered and generally predictable. We had a nice little routine. That day, I put him down for his nap like always. He was in one of those wooden cribs with the slatted sides, and his room was down the hall from the living room. From where I was sitting on the couch, I could see right into his room through the open door. That visibility gave me peace of mind, especially since I was alone in the house. I lay back on the couch and pulled a throw blanket over me. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. I was still grieving in that strange, quiet way you do when life is moving forward whether you like it or not. I drifted into that weird half-sleep state where you're still kind of aware of what's happening around you, but it all feels far away and floaty. I heard Colin start to bounce around in his crib. He was giggling, not crying, so I didn't rush to get up. I just called out, kind of lazily, "Hey bud, can we nap a little longer for Auntie?" He laughed again, louder this time. Then, very clearly, I heard someone whistle. It wasn't faint. It wasn't background noise. It was a sharp, distinct little tune, just a few notes long, like someone whistling while they walked through the house. Friendly, casual, completely out of place. I sat bolt upright. My heart did this weird lurch in my chest, like it couldn't decide whether to race or stop completely. I stared down the hall at Colin's room. He was standing up now, holding on to the crib rail facing the closet, still giggling. His whole expression was lit up like someone had just played peekaboo with him. I froze. It didn't feel like a ghost moment. It felt like someone had broken into the house. That was my first thought. A man, in the house, somehow got in without me hearing a thing. I didn't even check the closet. I just ran into the room, scooped Colin up, and carried him straight outside in my socks. We sat on the front steps while I called my friend Sadie and tried to explain what happened without sounding completely insane. She could tell from my voice something was wrong. She got there within 10 or 15 minutes and walked through the house with me while I held Colin on my hip like a human shield. But nothing was out of place. No open windows, no unlocked doors, no sign of anyone. I told Sadie exactly what I heard, and I'll give her credit, she didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly, like this wasn't the first time she'd heard something like that. Then, as we were getting Colin changed in his room, just trying to settle things back down, he looked toward the closet again and said, "Clear as day, Papa." That was what he'd called my stepdad. He'd only said the word a handful of times before, since he was still learning how to talk. But the way he said it that day, It was like he recognized something. Instead of freaking me out, it hit me in a strange, soft way. I had this gut-deep feeling that it really was Ron, that somehow, in some impossible way, he'd shown up just to check in. It didn't feel threatening. It felt like reassurance. That experience didn't scare me. It didn't leave me sleepless or paranoid. It actually made me feel calmer than I'd been in weeks. I think part of me needed it. And from that day on, I started paying more attention to those kinds of moments, the little ones that don't make sense, but feel too precise to be random. Years later, when I was in my early 20s and newly married, my husband introduced me to a couple he worked with, Danny and Mel, who were really into paranormal stuff, ghost investigations, old folklore, haunted sites. We hit it off immediately. It felt like finding people who spoke the same secret language I'd been whispering to myself for years. They told me about a cemetery out in Elbridge, near the old state hospital, and some state-run buildings. It was one of those places that always made the rounds in local stories. Supposedly active, especially at night. But it wasn't dark or creepy in the traditional way. In fact, the area was brightly lit because of all the floodlights around the parking lots. That made it even weirder, like the light was covering something up instead of revealing it. One Friday night, Danny and Mel picked me up after work, and we headed over with flashlights, extra batteries, and way too much coffee. I remember laughing on the drive over. It didn't feel like we were heading into anything serious. It felt like a night out. The first hour or so was completely uneventful. Just us walking through rows of old headstones, talking quietly, taking occasional photos. There was a steady hum from the streetlights nearby, but otherwise it was still. Then I walked through this patch of overgrown grass near a line of ivy and felt something brush across my face. Like a cobweb. I reached up immediately, reflex, but there was nothing there. No low branches, no plants tall enough to touch my face. I told Mel and she just said, "Same spot got me too." We followed the path further down into a more wooded part where the slope dipped toward a chain-link fence. Beyond that was one of the government buildings, flat, concrete, sterile. Its lights were harsh and sterile, lighting up the area like a parking garage. That's where I saw the man. He was walking along the cemetery side of the fence, parallel to us. I could see the outline of a uniform and a cat looked like a security guard doing rounds. He had a flashlight in one hand and was sweeping it back and forth across the ground like he was looking for something. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was checking the perimeter. Maybe we were somewhere we technically weren't supposed to be. I was already rehearsing an apology in my head. But then, he stopped. Right in the middle of his slow walk, he froze, no hesitation. Just stopped. Then he turned. A perfect, deliberate about face. Not casual. Not fluid. It looked almost choreographed. He raised the flashlight and pointed it straight at us. Now here's the part I still can't explain. The beam hit me directly. I could feel the brightness on my chest and face. But I couldn't see him. Not his face. Not even a hint of it. Just this vague, blank darkness under the brim of his cap. And the way he stood, it didn't feel like someone looking at us. It felt like someone performing the act of looking at us. Like a scene playing out, perfectly timed. No one said anything. We just backed away slowly, staying close together, then turned and walked quickly back to the car and left. After that, I don't chase ghosts anymore. I'd gone to stay with my cousin Bram for winter break. His cabin was way out near Mercer Glen, tiny place you'd miss even if you were trying to find it. He lived in a cabin his dad had built back when the mill was still running, tucked between bare trees and snowdrifts that didn't melt till April. I drove in from Monroe after my last exam. Took me almost 4 hours with the weather, but it felt worth it. Bram was the only family I still talked to. We hadn't seen each other in a few years, but there wasn't any tension. It was just life moving in opposite directions for a while. He was my age, but he'd been on his own since he was 16. Lived quiet, worked when there was work, snowmobiles, trail repair, anything involving tools. He was always good with his hands, better than I ever was. That winter, he didn't have anything steady going, but I got the sense he liked it that way. He didn't seem to need much. I figured it'd be a quiet couple of weeks. I brought a stack of books, 2 notebooks I wouldn't end up using, and enough sweaters to survive an avalanche. Bram warned me I'd lose phone service once I passed the old Texaco. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. First couple of days were easy. Cold, sure, but peaceful. We spent the evenings eating bad chili and trading dumb stories from high school, like people do when they realize they used to be closer than they are now. He still had that crooked grin when he laughed, the one that made you feel like he was letting you in on something. There was no TV, just a beat-up radio and a wood stove that made everything smell like pine and ash. Then, on the 3rd morning, the power went out. It was sudden, just this little flick of the overhead light, then nothing. No buzz from the fridge, no hum from the heater. We lit the stove and dug around until we found some candles that smelled vaguely like lemon and rubber. Bram didn't seem surprised. He said it happened sometimes when the ice was bad. But he paused when I asked how long it usually took to come back on. Usually just a day, he said, but we'll see. We didn't hear a single plow or service truck go by, not even the usual chainsaws from down the hill. The radio only gave us static, no matter how much we turned the dial. Bram said it was probably just weather, but I could tell it bugged him. He kept glancing out the window like he was waiting for something. That night I went to toss some food scraps out back and saw the snow had been disturbed near the fence, not footsteps. Not really. It looked like someone had dragged themselves across the yard. Long, deep grooves, like elbows and knees sinking into the snow, not footprints. No clear beginning or end, just a broken trail that led toward the woods and vanished under the trees. I stood there a bit longer than I should have, just staring, and when I mentioned it to Bram, he didn't say much, just sort of nodded like it confirmed something he'd already half thought. Things got worse that 3rd night. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to this sound, 3 sharp, echoing knocks. Not fast, just spaced out. It didn't sound like wood creaking or the stove shifting. It sounded intentional. I sat up and heard it again. Bram was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, halfway through lacing up his boots. He didn't look confused. He looked like someone who'd already made a decision. "You heard that too?" he asked. I nodded. He pointed toward the back of the house, where the porch was. Another knock came, lower this time, like something tapping the railing. I moved the curtain just enough to peek out. The yard was still. Snow everywhere. But that strange drag trail was back. It looked fresher now, like it hadn't been there an hour earlier. I told Bram it could have been a raccoon or maybe something fell off a tree. He didn't respond. He just kept staring at his rifle. In the morning, he went out to check the shed. I stayed inside with my coat still on. He came back and looking pale. "There's handprints," he said. But they're wrong. He showed me pictures on his phone. The prints were large, bigger than either of our hands by a lot. 5 digits, yeah, but they were spaced all wrong. No palm. Just narrow fingers splayed like they'd been pressed down by something guessing how a hand worked. At the end of each one was a deep indent. Not sharp, but sunken, like the tip of a claw had pressed into the wood. We didn't sleep much that night. Moved the dresser and an old trunk in front of the door. Took turns resting with the rifle on the coffee table between us. By day 5, we decided to leave. Problem was, Bram's truck wouldn't start. Nothing, not even the dashboard lights. And my car? Buried in snow up to the windows. We still had food, but the temperature kept dropping. Inside, you could see your breath in every room except right next to the stove. That night, sometime after midnight, I woke up again, but not from knocking, it was breathing. Slow, deliberate, too close. I couldn't tell where it came from, but it wasn't coming through the walls. It felt like it was already in the room, like it was circling without moving. I didn't move a muscle. My chest hurt from holding my breath, but I didn't dare let it out. Across the room, I could see Bram lying there, eyes open, staring straight up like he'd already been awake. He looked like he was waiting for something to happen. In the morning, there were more tracks outside. This time, they circled the house, over and over, at least 5 times. Long, wide, oval impressions, too far apart for any person to make. No shoes could have left that shape. And there was one window, mine, that had something smeared across it, like something greasy had pressed its face right up against the glass and held still. That day, Bram sat on the porch for hours with the rifle in his lap, barely said a word, just kept scanning the trees. He mentioned, real low, that this wasn't the first weird thing that had happened up there, but it was the first time it felt targeted, like it was about him. That night, I woke up freezing. Fire was dead. Room was dark. Bram was gone. I threw on my jacket, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped outside. Called his name. Nothing. Only one set of tracks led away from the door. His. They went about 20 feet into the yard and just stopped. Clean. No more steps. Just a crushed patch of snow and 2 faint drag marks heading back toward the woods. I turned, heart racing, and saw something move by the tree line. It wasn't quick, wasn't noisy, just slow, purposeful. It was tall, too tall to be a person, covered in what looked like moss or mud, maybe both. No fur, just this sagging, heavy texture that clung to its shape. Shoulders swayed as it stepped. I couldn't see a face, couldn't hear anything, but I felt it, like the silence got thicker wherever it passed. I ran back inside and slammed the door so hard, the hinges rattled. 10 minutes later, Bram came in from the side entrance. Quiet, shaken, but not hurt. I didn't leave, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I was in the shed. Thought I saw something out there. I didn't ask why his tracks stopped 20 feet from the door. We left at first light. Hiked down the road until we found a plow. Told the guy a tree fell on the roof and we needed a ride. Neither of us looked back. We got off work early that day. Snow was already coming down pretty heavy by 4. The boss didn't even argue. Said if we waited any longer, some of us weren't making it home. So I clocked out, grabbed a gas station coffee on the way out of town, and headed for the ridge road that runs behind Weaver's Gap. That stretch through McClintock Ridge is one of those places you get used to if you've lived around here long enough. Lots of sharp turns, steep shoulders, old trees right up against the road. It's beautiful in spring, but a pain in winter. The truck wasn't thrilled to be out in the cold. Heater worked, but only if you kept the fan low and didn't expect miracles. The defrost mostly kept the windshield clear. I had the wipers on medium and just took it slow. It wasn't dark yet, but the sky had that dim, flat gray color where you couldn't tell where the daylight ended or the storm began. Somewhere just past the second switchback I saw them. Brake lights. Just a quick flash of red disappearing off to the left. At first I thought it was someone pulling off for a break, maybe turning around. Then I realized it wasn't a pull-off. It was the entrance to an old logging road. No one should have been down there. It hadn't been plowed in years, and it's not even maintained anymore. We used to hunt back there when I was younger, but even then it was sketchy after the first snowfall. There's no houses, no cabins, just trees and steep terrain. It's not the kind of place you accidentally wander into. I slowed down at the fork, thought about stopping, but I kept going. A minute later, I changed my mind. I don't really know why. I guess something about those lights didn't sit right. Maybe I was bored. Maybe it was the way they vanished, too quick for someone just pulling over. I pulled off to the side, reversed carefully, and turned onto the trail. The snow was fresh. I could see the tire tracks clearly, 2 clean lines ahead of me in the powder. My headlights lit up the narrow path, just a tunnel of trees and white ahead. I told myself I was just checking it out, just making sure no one had gotten stuck. I've been part of trail searches before, volunteer stuff. I know how fast things can go wrong out here, especially when people panic or try to turn around on bad terrain. The road wound through tight patches of forest, then dropped down into a dip where the brush thickened. I kept waiting to see a vehicle, maybe someone half off the trail, maybe hazard lights blinking, but nothing. Just snow, trees, and those tracks still fresh. I crept forward until the trees thinned and the terrain sloped down hard on the left. That's when my headlights hit the edge of a sharp drop. The tire tracks ended there. I braked, cut the engine, and leaned forward. Down below 30, maybe 35 yards into the ravine, A small car had landed nose first in a shallow ditch, like it had dropped clean off the edge and bounced into the brush. The trunk was open, hanging crooked. One taillight still blinked slowly, just barely visible through the snow. I didn't even think twice. Grabbed my flashlight, left the door hanging open, and slid down the slope through the underbrush. No footprints. That was the first thing that stuck out. Just the marks where the car had come to rest, crushed a few bushes, and settled in. I walked around the car slowly, half expecting someone to call out from the trees. I even called out myself twice. Nothing. No blood, no bags, no phone. No signs of where the driver went, or if they ever got out. I checked the doors. Locked. Windows up. Front windshield was spiderwebbed from the impact, but not totally shattered. It didn't look like whoever was inside had busted their way out. It looked like no one had even tried. I hiked back up the slope to get a signal and texted my cousin Jeremy. He's part of the county's SAR team. Told him I found what looked like a solo wreck off Old Mill Trail. Figured he could run the plate or send someone to tow it out before the snow buried it completely. I was still standing there waiting on a reply when I heard it. Just one sound. A heavy, solid thud. Sharp. Final. Final. Like something dropping straight down onto metal. I turned fast and aimed the flashlight down the slope. And there it was, right on top of the car. Something big. Really big. Crouched low on the roof like it had landed hard. The metal was visibly dented under its weight. I could see its hands flat against the roof like it was steadying itself. Human-shaped, kind of, but off. It had this thick, hunched build, too wide in the shoulders, arms long, covered in what looked like dark, tangled hair or fur, like it hadn't been dry or clean in a long time. I didn't move. Didn't even raise the light at first. I just froze and listened. It didn't seem startled. It didn't growl or flinch. It slowly turned, like it had only just noticed me. That's when I raised the flashlight. Its head moved in this strange, weighted way, like the neck didn't turn right, like it wasn't used to moving like that. When it faced me, I saw part of its face. Flat nose, wide mouth, pale bluish-gray skin, eyes that were small and far apart. It didn't blink, just watched. Then it stood. No hurry, no threat. Just stepped down off the roof like it was getting off a stool, walked across the far side of the slope, deeper into the trees. Didn't look back. I didn't follow. That thought didn't even cross my mind. My phone buzzed. It was Jeremy. He asked for the coordinates. Asked if I saw any blood. I sent the pin. Took a quick photo of the scene, just the car. Figured I'd show him what I meant. Didn't notice anything strange until I got back in the truck and opened the photo. In the background, near the edge of the trees, just past where the thing had walked off, there was something else. A sliver of a face. Same shape, same color, same wide mouth and far-set eyes, but higher, way higher, maybe 8 feet up, like it was leaning out from behind the tree, but the tree was too thin to hide something that size, almost like it was suspended, watching. I sent the photo to Jeremy. Didn't say anything. He called me instantly. "You saw it, didn't you?" he said. I didn't answer. Then he told me he'd seen one too, 3 years earlier. Not far from where I was, same conditions. Snow, late in the day, he'd never told anyone. Said he took a picture, just like I did. Said it looked nearly identical. The tow crew showed up about an hour later. By then, the storm had picked up. Most of the tracks were gone. Jeremy and I never shared the photos. Didn't feel like explaining. Didn't feel like being questioned by people who weren't there. I don't take that road in winter anymore. If I see brake lights in the woods now, I keep driving. And if I catch sight of anything at all, that looks vaguely human standing in the trees, I don't look twice. That night, once I was sure whatever it was had moved on, I got back in the truck, turned around slow, and drove until I saw the highway again. I was 29 when I ended up staying at Silas's cabin for a few days that winter. We're technically second cousins. Our moms are first cousins, But since we both grew up bouncing between the same tired reunions and awkward holiday dinners, we always just called each other cousins. He's older than me by maybe 10 years, and while I went the city route, he went hard the other way, the off-grid way. He didn't just prefer solitude, he needed it like air. He'd inherited this old shack of a cabin outside a place called Breerfield, tucked somewhere into the Appalachian middle of nowhere. It was basically a hunting box someone had slapped 4 walls and a roof on, no insulation to speak of. A rusted stovepipe in the corner. You couldn't get a signal unless you hiked half a mile up a ridge and prayed to the clouds. No neighbors, no lights in the distance, just woods. Every winter, once deer season wrapped, Silas disappeared up there for a few weeks. Said it helped reset his head. That was his exact phrase. He made it sound like a meditative retreat, but knowing Silas, it probably involved a lot of sitting in silence and occasionally yelling at squirrels. That year, he'd invited me to join. I'd just come off a miserable holiday run messy breakup, way too much small talk with people I barely liked, and a New Year's hangover that felt like penance. So when he said I could come up for a few days just to clear out, I took him up on it. Thought the quiet might do me good. The drive-in was already a bit dicey. It had snowed the night before, and the roads were slick with that deceptive kind of ice you don't see until you're sideways. Once I turned off the main highway, it got worse. Just tight little roads winding through the hills, no guardrails, the kind of place where every curve feels like it's hiding a mistake. I almost missed the split for the trail up to the cabin. It didn't even have a sign, just a crooked post and some tire grooves that barely qualified as a road. But the first night was easy. Honestly, it was nice. We cooked on the little propane stove, split a bottle of rye, and played cards until we got bored. No big conversations, just comfortable silence and the crackle of the fire. It was snowing again by the time we went to bed, coming down hard enough that we knew the trail back would be buried by morning. Silas didn't seem concerned. He said the drifts always settled in a day or two. I figured we'd just hang tight, cut wood, and wait it out. Next day, we did exactly that. Hauled logs in, made coffee, took a slow walk out to the trap line behind the ridge. That's when I noticed the first thing that felt off. Some of the snares had been tripped, but not in the usual way. The bait was gone, sure, but the triggers weren't just sprung, they were twisted. One of the wire loops had been bent up at a weird angle, like something had yanked it straight upward with too much force. I pointed it out. Silas shrugged and said, "Raccoons, probably." But he didn't say it like he believed it. His mouth said raccoons, but his eyes were scanning the trees. That second night, we went to bed early. Not much else to do. It was so quiet out there it made your ears ring. Just wind and creaking trees. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones, crunching slow through the snow, circling the cabin in a single steady loop. Not wandering, not curious, just deliberate. I sat up and looked across the room. Silas was already awake, sitting on his cot, staring at the wall. "You hear that?" I whispered. He nodded, barely. Didn't say a word. The footsteps made a full circle, then stopped. We didn't move until we couldn't hear anything but the stove ticking as it cooled. Next morning, we found the prints. They weren't boot prints. No tread, just bare feet. Massive. The trail started behind the shed, passed under one of the windows, and led up the hill into the trees. 5 toes, a heel, spaced like a normal stride, just bigger, cleaner than any animal track I'd ever seen. I grew up hunting, and I know what bear tracks look like in snow. These weren't bear. Silas crouched next to one and held his hand over it. He didn't say much, just measured it roughly and said, 14 inches, easy. Then he stood up and went back inside. That whole day felt wrong, like the silence outside had teeth. We didn't light the stove that night. Silas didn't say why, but I knew. Smoke, smell, visibility. Whatever had walked around the cabin, he didn't want to give it anything to follow. We sat in the cold, passing the bottle between us. Every creak in the woods sounded like a footstep. Every gust outside made my chest tighten. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound right behind my head. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't loud, just light, measured, fingertips. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The tapping stopped. Then I heard it right through the wall. A breath. Low, long, dragging. Something was breathing on the cabin wall, close enough that I could hear the moisture in it. I heard Silas's cot creak. He was sitting up too. Neither of us spoke. The sound shifted. Now it was under the window, then near the door, then silence. We stayed like that until the sun came up. When we stepped outside, there were no prints. No signs of anything moving through the snow. Just untouched powder, smooth all around. We packed everything we could carry, didn't even finish our coffee. We just loaded our packs and left. The trail down was worse than before. Ice beneath fresh powder, every step a gamble. About halfway down, we saw it. A deer, lying on its side just off the trail. No blood, no wound. I guessed. We weaned. Its neck had been snapped, quick and clean, like something had grabbed and twisted. The body was still warm. Silas didn't even blink. He looked at me and said, "Go, don't stop, don't look back." I went. He dropped me at a gas station across the state line. I got out and he drove off without saying anything else.